And just waiting to see this comes on live on YouTube. All right. Hey, how's it going? This is Jesse here from the REI Conversion Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. I'm honestly not sure which episode number this will be, but welcome back. And today I've got a guest with us, and she's actually a returning guest, and that's Alissa. And we're going to dive right into copywriting for your ads. So effective copywriting. And Alissa works with almost 20 plus investors, and she does copywriting for them. So she knows that very, very well. And specifically, it's going to be for, I believe it's going to be specifically for buyer leads on all sorts of different platforms. But before we get into that, I do want to let you know that if you want to get a hold of resources from templates, scripts, and guides, please make sure you head over to resource.reiconversion.com. You'll find things like a CRM template that a guest that was talking about that they use for on Airtable, to email templates on presenting your deals for your buyers list. Really, really effective stuff, and much more inside of there. Head over to resource.reiconversion.com. Grab your free download there. You'll be added onto our mailing list, and that gives me a chance to sort of update you on some of the new content that we have, as well as new things we're doing around REI conversion. So hopefully you'll find that as a fair exchange. I hate spam as well, so we'll stay far and clear from that. Again, if you pause the show right now, just if you're on your phone or whatever it might be, just open up your browser, Chrome browser, whatever it might be, go to resource.reiconversion.com, drop your name and email, and then you can confirm it inside your email after the show. But let's start today's show now. And I have just brought on Alissa. Alissa, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Glad to have you back on the show. And it's something that I guess we briefly chatted about, and I was like, you were telling me that you're doing copywriting. I'm like, Alissa, I got to have you on for copywriting. I know there is a sort of strategy to all the chaotic copywriting out there, but I know it's something that you focus a lot on. So let's just dive right into this.
Okay.
First question: where do you spend most of your time writing your ad copy on? Is it for your sites, or what platforms might it be that you typically write most of your ad copy for?
Most investors that I write for are marketing on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist.
Yeah.
That's probably about 75% of the ads that I write. The other 25% are longer ads for their website or classified sites like land.com or Landmodo, places like that.
And do you see like a huge difference between writing your ads on, say, for something like Marketplace versus something like for a website?
There is a huge difference. On Marketplace, you have your reader's attention for no more than 3 seconds. So you really have to grab them in, suck them in, give them all the details really quick.
Yeah. Whereas
on your website or the classified sites, you might have them for up to 20 seconds. So it's a much better place to share those little details about the property.
Right. And I'm already jumping into, where do you write this? But what is sort of the end goal with copywriting? Why is it that somebody needs to hire someone like you? Obviously to save time, but is there something that you're doing that you're trying to achieve with these copies? And what is it that makes copy special, I guess? Or yeah.
Yeah. So I try to sell the lifestyle, not the land. A lot of the investors I write for are investing in the same places. And especially when you're starting out as a land investor, you're not getting the really excellent properties. You might have something outside Deming, New Mexico, or out in West Texas where it's desert as far as you can see. But there's still good things about that land. They have few restrictions and people like that. Or there's tons of outdoor recreation, or there's hunting. And that's what's going to draw people in. Nobody wants to see a map and just a list of details. So by giving them what they can do and helping them visualize what they can do on this land, it really helps them sell.
Yeah.
And I want them to sell, because then they come back with new properties for me to write ad copy for. So we all win.
Yeah. And isn't that the thing about, sales copy and ad copy is really not detailing. It's not about detailing the property itself or the product itself. It's really sort of conveying that end image, or how the buyer will end up using that piece of property. How you're sort of, like you said, selling an image to them, right?
You are, definitely.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
And when you're writing these ads, you just mentioned that on Facebook Marketplace, you keep those quite short. Do you know how many words is an effective length?
I stay around 100 words.
Okay.
Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but 100 is the average.
And say on something like on a website, when you're describing the property, other than obviously all the details and all the information, when you're just sort of writing the copy itself for that property on a website, is that in similar length as well?
Those I write around 250 words because you have your reader's attention longer. You can go into a little more detail about the area. So
Sure.
250 words, sometimes a little longer if it's really flowing or it's a really fantastic area.
So if an investor were to focus on one platform to really write effective copy, where would you say they should spend most of their time on?
You're going to get way better leads from the classified sites than you are Facebook Marketplace. Marketplace is kind of drying up a bit. I've seen lots of investors post in Facebook groups recently that they're just not getting the leads that they used to. And it's getting harder and harder to advertise there. So if you can afford to be on some of the classified sites, that's definitely where your focus should be.
And which classified sites would you recommend?
Land.com, it's expensive, but you are top of the Google rankings for sure, which always helps. Landmodo, Land Century,
Yep.
a lot of investors use those and they've had some success there as well. I think those are lower priced by quite a bit. And Zillow, I've heard now, charges for sale by owner, but Zillow is always a popular one too.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And have you done sort of any split testing with copywriting? Have you noticed anything typically does a little bit better? Any nuggets that you can sort of share with us?
There's never a typical when it comes to selling land, but a lot of times I do sales for Clint at Away Land Company. So I'll write two versions of an ad. I'll put one on my Facebook page and one on his, or not Facebook page, Facebook Marketplace out of my account and one out of his, and just kind of monitor which one is doing a little better, which feature I focused on, maybe that's attracting the buyers that we want. And I get lots of feedback from the investors that I write for too. Most of them have me do 3 to 5 different versions for Craigslist and Facebook, and they'll let me know which one really performed and which one got the job done. So that helps me be a better writer and find their ideal customer.
Was there something that you tested or you tried that it sort of you thought might have done really well, but it actually bombed, or the other way around, that you thought it wasn't effective and actually turned out to be quite effective?
All the time. Buyers will surprise you all the time.
Yeah.
With Clint, we had one property that it was right in an elk corridor. And I'm like, this is great. Like, people love elk. Like, let's focus on the elk. And so we're advertising elk all over the place. Not one buyer came for the elk. So we switched to homesteading and got it sold. So I was wrong on that. I was the only one excited about the elk.
Got you. Are there probably specific words that and on general, obviously not as something as specific as elk, but is there something in general that investors should stay away from writing, perhaps, or specific words that they should stay away from writing?
On Facebook and Craigslist, they both have different words that will trigger flagging. On Facebook, especially anything related to hunting, fishing, any animal words, any names of animals, the word horse. If you're trying to sell horse property, things like that. Facebook is very, very serious about their no guns and no animal sales. So, you get creative. Instead of fishing, you might say angling, or, you're going to cast your line in the reservoir, things like that. You can dance around it for sure. And the buyers that you want will get it. They'll understand. On Craigslist, if your ad looks like a scam, it'll get flagged. So I avoid words like owner financing. Sometimes I avoid no credit check, things like that, and try to say it in different ways so that it looks like a legitimate ad, and that'll help get it through Craigslist's algorithms so that it stays. But it's a learning process because both platforms are always changing.
Sure.
Always.
Sure.
So what used to work might not work anymore.
And other than the technical sort of things that they should stay away, is there anything in general experience you think that they should just stay away that, might be totally fine with Craigslist and Facebook, but you just thought, things like this or words like this don't typically do too well, even though you thought it might have done well?
It just depends which type of buyer you're trying to attract. Some investors have me write ads more like Billy Mays selling OxyClean, very enthusiastic, lots of bold words, lots of caps,
Yeah,
things like that. But that might not attract your snowbirds if you're trying to sell retirement property.
right.
So, just think about your buyer and the kind of ads that they're searching for and read ads. I read ads all the time. I am on every classified site reading ads every time I get a new investor in an area I'm not familiar with. I'm on Zillow, I'm on land.com, I'm all those places reading ads.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to find good copy examples because so many investors and realtors just list the statistics on a property and leave it at that.
Right.
And that's not helping anybody. That's not helping the buyer, and that's not helping me as a copywriter learn about the area and what's great about it.
So what would you, if you were to work with an investor, what would you like to get from them? If somebody just hired you and just said, "Hey, listen, I need to write a an ad for this 40-acre piece here," what would you typically like to find out from the investor, or do you go and research, or how's this typically work with you?
I usually ask for the due diligence sheet
Hmm.
and their pricing if they want me to include pricing. Not all of them do. And that will get me started. Even if it's an area I'm not familiar with, Google will tell me a lot, but most investors are investing in the same counties. So I've gotten to know a few counties really, really well.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay, got you. Um, and yeah, how do you typically structure your copy or your ad itself? Is there a typical sort of formula that you follow?
It varies investor to investor, but the two things that I always do is start with a hook. What is going to hook your buyer into reading the rest of that ad? And then end with a call to action. So many
Hmm.
people forget to put something as simple as message me for the details at the end. You just leave them hanging. So those are the two things that every ad must have. Everything else in the middle depends on the
I
investor.
totally agree with you. The hook or the headline itself and that call to action, it's something that I always stress about as well. It's funny, you do see some ads out there that don't have call to actions, and like you said, you sort of leave them hanging there, not sure what to do, or mentally they're just not triggered. It might be quite obvious, but it's not triggered that here's what you need to do, and sometimes you need to hold their hand and get them to that next step, and sometimes that'll cost you a sale perhaps, and yeah, it can definitely slow you down. So that's a
Yeah,
great one.
definitely. On Craigslist, it's always nice to put, do you want them to call you or do you want them to email you?
Hmm.
Because you've got both options there. And some people are way more likely to pick up the phone. Some people like to text. Some people like to email.
Yeah,
You can put that they can do all three and they'll know that they'll reach you.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And then you write so much ad copy for so many different investors. And you've got different versions for different properties. What tools do you use to sort of organize all your copy for all the different ad postings?
I am old school and I just have folders on my hard drive and I use Microsoft Word. A few investors have me share, they'll have me put it in Google Drive and then share the document with them. A few have me put it in their Airtable or we share a Dropbox, but most of my ads, probably 99% of them, are on my hard drive in a folder
Hmm.
with the investor's name. And I named them all with the investor's name and which property it is. So I'm
Sure.
I'm pretty organized when it comes to all that. But I grew up in the 90s. Microsoft was the thing. Microsoft Word was what you used, and I still use it.
I get you. I get you. I'm from that era as well. So, um, coming back to a question I was sort of asking about earlier, and you sort of briefly touched on it. Um, is there Do you sort of work on the type of tone or the type of voices you use in your ad copy? And is that something that you think about?
It is. Every investor is different, and I'm not writing ads for myself. I'm writing it for them. So
Right.
one of the first things that I ask them when I start working with a new investor is, to send me samples of ads they like, or I'll send them samples and say, hey, which of these kind of speaks to you? Because I'm trying to find their voice. It's their property. It needs to reflect them. Some are very enthusiastic, trying to attract, the young people that want to get out there and go off grid, and some are trying to attract snowbirds. And sometimes it varies within the same investor as well, if they've
Yeah.
got different properties that would attract different buyers. So once I find their voice, we're good to go. And when I go to write new copy for them, I pull up the old copy and I read through it real quick just to make sure that I'm covering all the points they wanted to cover.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you find there's a certain type of voice that is more effective than others, or it just really depends on the audience?
It depends on the audience and it depends on the investor too.
Mm.
Some investors are young and hip and some are been there, done that, seasoned investors, and their voice is just different based on who they are.
And what do you see that is more popular um, in terms of a type of voice?
Um, More formal. Most investors tend to lean towards the more formal. I
Mm.
get a few that want to be Billy Mays selling OxyClean, but most go for the formal.
Got you, got you. Um, Alissa, am I sort of missing anything else? I had, we sort of went through some of the questions I had here. Is there any sort of general advice you would have about writing copy for, especially land? I mean, you focus only on land, is that correct? No houses?
No houses. Yeah, nobody's ever asked me to write about a house, but I like vacant land.
Yeah, yeah,
That's kind of the group that I've fallen into, and I know vacant land really well. Just if you get stuck and you're not in a position to hire somebody, go
yeah,
read ads. Read ads all the time. Be on all these classified sites reading ads about the areas where you're investing because it will just inspire you. And plagiarism is wrong, but there's nothing wrong with taking the ideas or the points that they hit and making them your own, making it part of your property.
Is there something that they should be looking for when they're reading those ads?
Just whatever inspires you, what
Mm.
is drawing you in, and remember why you invested in that property in the first place. For
Right.
some people, it's just because that's what they could afford, but it can still be a great property. I've been doing this for about a year and a half now,
Yeah.
and investors come back to me over and over, and I know their land is selling,
Yeah.
and we've gotten creative with some properties to make them attractive, but
Mhm.
whether it's buildable, unbuildable, whether it's in the city, whether it's in the middle of nowhere, we can get them sold.
Sure.
It's you have to market it, but I can get you the copy that'll attract your reader.
Awesome. So, Alissa, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's sort of the best way that they can find you?
I have a Facebook page, Land Ads for Investors. You can find me there. I
That's
am
awesome.
terrible about keeping it updated,
Okay.
but I am on there. Facebook, I'm on there. Alissa Madsenberry. Those are probably the two best ways. Say
Eh,
99% of my investors come to me through Facebook, and then I'll get you my email address, and we'll go from there.
got you. And if you're part of the REI conversion community for land investors, if you're not, make sure you join. But you can always comment under this podcast episode or wherever else, and I'll make sure to tag Alissa so you can reach out to her if you want to get in touch with her. Um, Alissa, thanks very much for coming on the show and sort of tackling some of these questions about copywriting. I know it's something that a lot of investors sort of put off aside and just write whatever they think will work. But it's always great to have an expert who focuses solely on literally land investing copywriting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, thanks very much for coming on the show, and hope to have you on again.
Yes, it's been great.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks.
Okay.